pressing, most important, or most...
There's a lot of environmental issues that are depressing.
Yeah, like all of them. Like, what do you find the most depressing? And then, like any solutions that you might have.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, so I've given you like 2 seconds to think about now.
I'll just do it on the fly.
Okay.
So, I am Peter Saundry. I'm the Executive Director of the National Council for Science and the Environment. And we're the organization that puts on this conference. The organization is about connecting science with decision making. And our particular approach to that is bringing diverse individuals and institutions and communities together to do things they couldn't do separately. And so this conference is all about that. Bringing government, bringing scientists, bringing policymakers, bringing NGOs, bringing corporations together to talk about what they have in common. Out of the courtroom, out of the political spotlight where everybody's posturing in full of rhetoric, something where they can be very constructive together. And the essence of this conference is to provide a forum once a year to look at one pressing issue and bring folks together on that issue and come up with solutions. So last year we looked at the green economy, before that biodiversity, climate change, energy, water, forecasted environmental change. So we've gone through a number. This is our 11th. And what we saw today was a lot of people around the oil spill out in the Gulf looking at issues. The day was great because the National Commission, a week after it released its report, talked about its findings. Then we had the Secretary of Interior responding, announcing a major reorganization in response to those findings of the Commission. And we had lots of experts through the day looking at different aspects of this. And then we had the government person who's going to oversee those changes, really detailing what they're going to do. Now there's a great example of, okay, here's a problem, we've all seen the spill, we've all seen the consequences, so what are the solutions? What's the way forward? Often the way forward is not some simple, throw a lot of money at it, or just stop this or stop that. It's about how you balance society's different needs. So society on the oil day argues about, we want energy, we want lots of it, we want it cheap, we want it but without trashing our environment. So you got to protect the environment, but we don't want too much regulation, and we don't want too much of this and too much of that. And so it's a tough kind of situation to resolve. The role of science is to give us the best tools possible to use. It doesn't guarantee a perfect solution, but it guarantees that we have as much knowledge, as much power as possible to find the right compromise. Now the next 2 days of the conference deal with lots of different issues. We have 8 themes. And these were the original 8 themes of the conference. And they vary from issues of carbon, which deals with climate change and sea level rise, acidification, to issues of living marine ecosystems, to issues of tipping points, to the Arctic, and so on.
Education.
So what's going to happen is then tomorrow afternoon we have 24 local breakout sessions, they're workshops. And they are, more than today, what this conference is about. In those workshops, diverse groups of people are going to develop solutions. And not just abstract solutions like Congress should spend $1 billion here or $1 billion there, or corporations stop doing this, or environmental groups should do this. It's going to be about what we in the room are going to contribute to making happen.
Are you going to not let them out of the room until they come up with the solutions? Because that might work.
Their requirement is they must come up with 8 outcomes. Now sometimes they may be small and they may be part of a larger outcome. And then what you'll see on Thursday afternoon and Friday is this slide reoccurring on the screen. What are you going to do after this conference as a result of the breakout session you were in? And that is the outcomes. Now, you may have heard this before. There's a difference between outputs and outcomes. Outputs are things like, oh, here's a document, here's what we think should happen. People walk away. That's an output. An outcome will be when, okay, us in the room, we're going to start now a process by which we're going to meet every month and talk about how we're, say, going to address the connection between oceans and human health. How are we going to build a community around this? How are we going to communicate to the public its importance? How are we going to work with agencies? How are we going to make it all come together? And that's when you start having outcomes. That's change. And getting to that is the essence of this conference. That's what makes it worthwhile. Great speakers, nice, enjoyable, and a lot of fun. But the question becomes, what are you going to do differently as a result of being here? And that's the challenge. That's what this conference ultimately is all about.
So they're going to put out recommendations.
Yes.
And they're going to try to implement them.
Yes.
And how are you going to get these recommendations out to the general public?
Well, what we've done, and it's been a lot of work over the last 12 months in getting this conference where it is. In each of the breakout sessions are the people that can implement. Okay? And so what we've done is, it's not just about getting people interested in the issue together, but it's who are the people that can
Get it done.
make change afterwards. And so we find foundations, you find scientific societies, you find NGOs, you find all sorts. And what we try to get them is who are the ones that are going to follow on. So I was just talking about the human health and oceans connection. Okay, so you've got foundations, you've got government, you've got NGOs, you've got scientists in the room. Okay, how do they form a coalition and say bring in the media communications expertise to take that message to the public? And that's going to be their challenge. And so what we do is when we look at each of these sessions, we have them, okay, here's the subject matter we want to do, here's what we're going to discuss, and then we say, okay, what are the outcomes? Until a session specifies what its outcomes are going to be, they're not accepted for this conference. And even after that stage, when they've said what their outcomes are going to be, we bring them into an advisory group and it grills them. Okay, how are you going to get that outcome? Who's going to be in the room that's going to make that outcome happen? And so the success of a conference like this is the work that goes into it beforehand. And so over the last 12 months, we have had, I don't know how many conference calls of folks all over the world. We've had people calling in from Europe and Japan and all around the world talking about, okay, here's what we want to get to do, how are we going to make it happen? And that's the challenge. And so we have this website, ourchangingoceans.org.
It's a great website.
All of the stuff from the sessions are going up there.
Great.
So there's videos and reports and recommendations. And then after tomorrow, what are their outcomes? And then it's going to be, okay, a month from now, what are your outcomes? 6 months from now, what are your outcomes? A year from now, what are you doing? And you have to keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Now, the good news is that in the last 12 months, organizations in the oceans community, government, NGO, scientific, have been absolutely wonderful. I cannot say too much about how great the people we have dealt with are. And they have been willing to put a lot of pro bono time in and effort and commit their organizations to doing things after the conference. And in essence, that's where the power is. We're a catalytic kind of organization, convening organization, facilitating a secretariat type of organization. But none of that means anything unless the community you want to work with comes together. That's the real challenge.
It's wonderful. And the past conferences, what is it, the same format, getting them in this think tank kind of thing? And what successes have you seen throughout the years, what they're doing?
A lot of different things. Energy conference. One example was there needed to be a new grouping of different energy folks in the research community, because you have your coal people here, you have your solar people here, you have your biofuels over here. So we formed, as a result of that, a new Council of Energy Research and Education Leaders. And they meet throughout the year. There's an ongoing organization.
As a result of this conference,
Yep.
they created this whole...
During the education conference, we had a new partnership for sustainability education in the United States. And the players came together, and we sort of helped them get going, and now they're off doing their activities. They meet regularly, they promote certain educational activities. Sometimes we provide a platform. We have this thing called the Encyclopedia of Earth. It's an online resource. The simplest version may be like Wikipedia with quality control.
Is it on your Our Changing Oceans website,
No.
or is it a different...
eoearth.org is where it is, Encyclopedia of Earth, eoearth.org, and it sits on a platform where there's all of this reviewed, publicly accessible, Creative Commons, open copyright content.
Right.
It's not just that, it's about all sorts of resources, not just articles. And then we have a part of the website that deals with people building their own website and web resources, just like a social networking tool.
Right.
Now, the conference sits on that part of it, but it draws in substantive content from the Encyclopedia of Earth. So we use that one. For example, you may have seen on the slides today, we have a resource called Ocean Oil. Educational resources built around the Gulf oil spill and its aftermath. So how do you not just sort of use it as lots of images of oiled birds? How do you understand what really happened, what the driving forces like our energy policy and our energy needs that brought that happen, the endless pushing into deeper waters. All of the sessions that were done today, all those great speakers' announcements, we had them all webcast recorded. They're all going up onto this ocean oil resource. So people are going to be then using it in the classroom.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So that's just one example. We have one on climate change called CAMEL. So again, it's often about synergies between different parts of things that we do. We have a network of 160 universities, so we try to bring them in and utilize them. But it's really about bringing folks together. NCSE, at the end of the day, is about bringing folks together to do things collectively. And we can be successful only to the extent that they come together and embrace that and do things. And we've been fortunate. We've seen some good successes. We've also had things that failed. But you don't get success without failure.
So we're talking about the leaders and the environmental leaders and NGOs and all that. What can the average person do to help any of the environmental issues that we're facing today? Or whatever you think is the most... I mean, there's too many.
Okay. If you're acting only as an individual by yourself, then you start thinking about your own behavior. I always think one of the great, important philosophies that we all need to embrace is this. Everything we do and everything that we don't do has consequences. You need to be aware of what those consequences are. Every time you buy something, every time you consume something, every time you use something, every time you travel somewhere, it has consequences. Now, doesn't mean you shouldn't do all those things, but you need to be aware of what those consequences are and think about it. So, you're traveling somewhere, you're doing carbon offsets. I think that's important. If you're using lots of stuff, are you recycling? If you're using energy and you're concerned about its consequences, what are you doing to be efficient? So, all of those things on a personal level, do. Now, but we're all not just individuals acting alone. We're also part of lots of communities. Are you part of your local community in some way? Do you work through your school, through your local chamber of commerce, through your workplace? You also can, if you choose, be parts of other groupings, communities. Are you a member of an environmental organization, business association? Are you all of these groupings that you have? Then you're a citizen of your town and you vote in your town. You're a citizen of your county. You vote in your county. You're a citizen of your state. You're a citizen of your country.
So every one person can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And you realize that you connect to the world, both as what you do as an individual, but through all of these connections you have to others. Every one of them offers an opportunity. And you can, and every once in a while you arrive in a very interesting place to do something interesting. One of the most interesting speakers we saw today was General Walsh.
I interviewed him earlier.
Yeah, General Walsh was really interesting. He is from the Army Corps of Engineers. If there's an institution that environmental groups love to hate, it's the Army Corps of Engineers.
But they're brilliant.
They are these engineers who have cemented, and built dams and channeled and all sorts of things. Here you have this man who's become head of one of the most important parts of the Army Corps of Engineers, coming in, and he's thinking not just about how I do engineering, how do I carry out my cement this and cement that, but how do I then bring this larger understanding of where the Mississippi Basin has come from, where it's going through. How do I connect Canada to the Gulf of
He
Mexico?
wants it all connected.
And so
It
you
is
look,
all
you look
connected.
at that, and you've got this person who has taken leadership in a very important position within a certain type of institution that has this history. And you look at what he's doing. And I have to say, you say, there's an individual that's making a difference. All of us, in small ways. He can only make a difference as much as the rest of the Army Corps, the rest of his division, want to go along with what he's doing. Each of us are like that. And so I look at somebody like General Walsh and say, there's a role model. You look at the speakers we had today in different parts, and some of them they're great leaders. They're no different from anybody else. They've simply said, I intend to step up and try to lead. Every one of us has that leadership capability. There's a choice. The question is, you look around at your life, you look around the world, you look at the consequences of what you do and do not do, and then you make a choice. What are you going to do? And that is ultimately the big question for every individual. And whether they can have just regular folk. We're all just regular folk. None of us are more influential than others. Some of us have more influence. Those are more influence are largely those who choose to do it. And
they have more responsibility. If they have more influence, they have...
But you look around, and there are hundreds of people out there who were invisible to the larger world, who stepped in at a certain time and said, you know, I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to be a leader in the Love Canal, New York. I'm going to be a leader in my local community. I'm going to join this organization. I'm going to put it out. And over time, responsibility, influence, change. And that's the challenge.
Let's do it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
I'm General Mike Walsh, and I'm the Division Commander for the Mississippi Valley Division, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I actually have 3 hats. I'm also the President-designee of the Mississippi River Commission. The Mississippi River Commission was started by Congress in 1879, and I'm also the Commander of Task Force Hope that is building the hurricane storm damage risk reduction systems around Greater New Orleans after the Katrina issues. The Congress had appropriated $14.6 billion for the Corps of Engineers to rebuild the flood reduction systems in around that city.
A lot of hats you're wearing.
A lot of hats and very challenging and very passionate about all the stuff that I'm able to work with.
What is the most challenging issue that you're facing right now?
Well, the most challenging issue is very short term. The president said that we would reduce the risks of surge flooding, hurricane flooding in the city of New Orleans this hurricane season. So by June 1, which is 132 days from today, we need to make sure that we have the systems constructed and in place to guard against 1% storm. We're very close to getting that accomplished, and in 5 months, I'm lasering in on that one right away. This president said that we would get that accomplished this year, so we're working pretty hard on it. From a larger scale, we're looking at recognizing the Mississippi watershed as not a collection of smaller watersheds, but the Mississippi watershed is the third largest watershed in the world, and that includes the water from the Ohio, the water from the Missouri, the Arkansas River, the Red River, and people don't recognize that their subbasins are part of the larger watershed. So
How many square miles is that watershed?
it's 1.25 million square miles.
So that's a lot of input into,
Absolutely, it's 41% of the United States puts water into the Mississippi watershed, or 31 states. And so getting 31 states recognizing that they have direct impact onto the Mississippi watershed is the challenge that we're looking for, is to get that recognized.
what is the impact that people are putting into the river?
Well, the impact is generally pretty good. Certainly, we have navigation on the Mississippi River and on the Ohio, and so we're able to move grain from the middle part of our country out to the world. The Mississippi River used to be called the inner coast. We got the east coast, the west coast. We've got the inner coast, and so those navigable channels are very important to the economy of our nation. And then there's also environmental challenges as well that we need to continue to work on. Certainly the dead zone that we talked about just a few moments ago in the Gulf of Mexico. One of the causes is the nitrates that come off of non-point issues from the agriculturalists in the 12 states that are along the Mississippi. And so we'll work on that particular item as well. So it's a huge third largest watershed in the world. It has a huge issues that we're getting recognition that it is, and then putting together some sort of governance system on what do we do with the third largest watershed in the world. I'm not sure it's a federal mission, and 31 states, I'm not sure they've recognized where we need to address those issues. But I think once we get a vision that there is a recognized third largest watershed in the world, the Mississippi River watershed, we can expand that further to governance.
Is there any incentives for farmers to perhaps change their, instead of a chemical fertilizer, maybe to go to something a little bit more natural instead of, heavy use of pesticides? Maybe there's different ways. I mean, I know that you can't regulate that federally, but is there any kind of incentive to have the farmers be more environmentally sensitive in their practices?
Well, I think the agriculturalists are generally environmental friendly as much as they can be. But yes, there are definitely incentives with the Farm Bill managed with the USDA and EPA and a few others that pay the agriculturalists to manage their farmland a little bit differently, so that they can capture some of those nitrates before they get into the river, or to work with non-pesticide type of ingredients, but also to look at no-till farming as well. All of that has had great benefits, I think, to this.
And before we were talking about that the dead zone has been reduced through efforts of the government and education of farmers. Do you see that continuing into the future?
But there's so much about the dead zone that scientists don't know. Last year it was reduced greatly in size, but I think if you talk to some scientists would say, well, that's because the water temperature wasn't as high as the previous years. Well, the winds were different in different years, and so I'm not quite sure the science is there to say how does the dead zone grow or get smaller. But last year when we measured it, it was smaller than the previous years. I know that we've been reducing the nitrates on the Mississippi River, so that's having an impact. How big of an impact that is, I'm not sure the scientists yet.
What do you think the average citizen can do? I mean, this is a giant area of land and many American citizens, but what could the average citizen do to help out, you know, stopping the dead zone, stopping the nutrient input, and just to, you know, be a more mindful of the environment?
I think that what the average person can do is just recognize in their own local area things that they can do from a micro perspective of how they can make the environment better for their grandkids. And Native Americans typically think in the 7-generation type of, you know, what if I'm going to do this? What are 7 generations from now going to impact from the decisions that we make today? I think if more and more people recognize what I do with this plastic bottle, what I do with this paper bag, what I do with this plastic bag is going to impact in what way my grandkids. And I think if you recognize from that perspective, okay, maybe I could change the way I address my life today, so it's not going to impact my grandkids during their time frame. I think if people think in that perspective, that long-term approach that might affect their behavior.
Speaking of plastic bags, there's a lot of countries across the planet that have instituted bans or you know, types of bans. And it was the head of the UNEP said that there should be a worldwide ban on the production of plastic bags. Where do you see America in banning plastic bags? The single-use thin film typical grocery bags that are, you know, we use about 300 to 700 a year each American on average, and it's made of oil. You know, so do you have any take on that? Throw out plastic bags.
Well, from an Army Corps of Engineer perspective, it's not something that we address, and frankly, I'm not quite sure I know the science between a plastic bag and a paper bag and a cloth bag.
Mm-hmm. Well, plastic is less energy to produce, and if properly disposed of, it's less energy to dispose of, causes less emissions. But the problem is that most of them are not properly disposed of, and they're littering the seas. And it's just a pet project of mine to get rid of plastic bags. And I was just wondering what you thought. You brought it up.
Yeah. Oh no. Fair game. I don't know. I don't know enough to.
I mean, so many different countries are banning them outright. South Africa, Ireland, Italy just did a ban. There's just so many places, and I see America kind of sitting back on a lot of these major environmental issues, not signing on, you know, protocols and whatnot. And I'm just wondering if the head of the UN is like, we shouldn't even be making them. You know, how about, can you talk to your boss and say, let's just ban that?
I think that needs to come from ground roots.
Okay.
I'm working that.
I'll be working. I don't know, because you have like a direct line.
No.
No?
Well, great. I got to catch the EPA administrator.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.